What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, it feels like forever since we've gotten a video out. Personal stuff going on. Cody here is moving into a new house. I'm kind of moving some stuff around, dealing with a job and everything. And then, of course, we're kind of in this dry spell, Cody. There's not been a lot to talk about for the Indianapolis Colts, at least not until the NFL draft gets here.
Right. And it's like, unless you want to hear the same debates we've had about the quarterback position, right, there's really not a whole lot to talk about. The Colts haven't made an outside free agent signing in a number of weeks now. There's not a whole lot going on as far as it concerns the Colts. I mean, Jim Irsay came out, posted a tweet out yesterday, and someone's got to teach Jim how to get high HD quality photos because they were all pretty blurry. But he comes out, and I think, what is that? It really doesn't tell you anything. I mean, outside of like anybody who thinks the Colts aren't drafting a quarterback. I mean, like they're drafting a quarterback at this point, But yeah, it's just there's not a whole lot going on right now. The Colts are very locked in to this NFL draft, to the quarterbacks, to the guys they have. There with right now sitting at 4. But it is going to be interesting. There are some things that could and probably will impact the Colts. Potentially happening with some of the quarterbacks that could potentially go ahead of where Indianapolis is picked and the top 3 picks before them. So really excited to kind of talk about that. And it's good to be back, Manny. You're right. It does feel like it's been so long since we've been able to do an episode together. So yeah, excited to jump back in.
Absolutely, man. And yeah, you're right. The that tweet that Jim Irsay put out the other day of all 4 of the quarterbacks, it told us a few things. Obviously, the direction that the Indianapolis Colts are going. It basically, if anyone had any doubt on the Indianapolis Colts not taking a quarterback with that 4th overall pick, you got another thing coming. There's no doubt that the Indianapolis Colts are looking to get a quarterback. And with today's news that's been going around for the NFL in general, that makes it even more apparent for the Indianapolis Colts. So what we've been hearing, first things first, before we get into what Adam Schefter said on NFL Live, we have to talk about Bryce Young, because Bryce Young stated he has canceled the remaining visits from all other teams. He visited with Carolina and the Texans this last week and has canceled everything else. So what we know, Cody, is that most likely means one of these 2 teams told him that they're taking him. And maybe both of them did. But nevertheless, we know that Bryce Young is going to probably be a top 2 pick in the draft, which most people probably assumed anyway. But it kind of just confirms what we were suspecting, is that he is expecting to be picked within the first 2 picks, most likely with that number 1 pick, Cody, because remember, Carolina is desperately looking for a quarterback. And by a lot of standards, everyone thought Bryce Young was the best quarterback in this draft. Now, the size obviously is a big concern with a lot of different people, but the GM of the Carolina Panthers, Dave Tepper, loves Bryce Young, loves quarterbacks who score well on their testing, which Bryce Young had a phenomenally good score on, by the way. So it just feels like there's a vibe going on that the Carolina Panthers may be rolling the dice and going with Bryce Young. But what do you think of everything going on and Bryce Young canceling his visits?
You're right. If it's not 1, it's certainly going to be 2. And I really think it's pretty heavy favorites right now. From everything I've heard, it really does seem like Bryce Young. It's pretty much a lock. Like if there's never really a lock with some of these quarterbacks. I think this is the most confident I've felt about the direction that Carolina is going to go at 1. And I do think Bryce Young is that pick, just because you're right. He does have that mental aptitude. He is a very bright, young man. Obviously, we know what he did at his time in Alabama as well. So he's just got everything you're looking for. Yes, the height is potentially a concern, but we've seen quarterbacks, who maybe haven't had that on their side have success in this league. So, I mean, yeah, he's about everything you're looking for in terms of a future at quarterback. And, Carolina, to give them credit, they knew that they wanted to get one of these guys. And, as they kind of went along and through their process, it does seem like Bryce Young has separated himself, at least for them, as the clear-cut guy number one. So I would be shocked, honestly, Derek, if they did go any other direction at this point, just based off of what we've heard. But I think there's no chance he gets out of the top two at all. I really think it's either. And I think, you got to feel, if you're a Houston fan right now, you got to be so angry at your team for beating the Colts that last week, because you really took yourself out of the Bryce Young sweepstakes potentially with that win. So shout out Houston for winning that one. You don't get a chance at Bryce Young, but it is very interesting because, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, I don't think it's a lock, Derek, that Houston takes a quarterback at 2. I don't think it's a lock. I thought there's no question Houston takes a quarterback at 2. But it seems like Bryce Young has been their guy from the start, right? Everybody's projected Bryce Young's going to be the guy. If he's there, Houston's going to take him. But it does shake things up, with the hiring of DeMeco Ryans, a defensive-minded guy. Will Anderson sitting there at 2, man. It is tempting if Houston's there. Remember, they do have the number 12th overall pick as well. So do they feel confident that, they could maybe get a quarterback then? They could, maybe – They get like a Hendon Hooker type of quarterback. I don't know who would even be available right there, or maybe they just go best player available there. They get 2 really good, blue chip players there within the top 15. I don't know what the route's going to be for Houston, but I really don't think if Bryce Young goes number 1, I think it's honestly, Derek, for me, a 50-50 chance it goes either way. They take a quarterback or they don't.
Yeah, absolutely. The stance is still the same when it comes to Bryce Young and the Texans. I think that the Texans are all in on Bryce Young, and I think they've told him that, hey, if Carolina doesn't take you at number 1, we're going to take you at number 2. I think that's definitively what they want to do. And from reports that I've heard is that they're not sold on any other quarterback in this draft, and they're only sold on Bryce Young. So it definitely opened some things up. And Adam Schefter confirmed that on NFL Live today, went on and said that he does not believe that there will be a quarterback taken with the picks 2 and 3 if the right person is not there for the Texans. He thinks that Carolina is going to take one, and if Carolina takes a specific quarterback, that it means that the Texans will most likely field the best defensive player possible. And if Arizona doesn't trade, they will field the best defensive player possible at that spot. And then allow the Colts, who are sitting at number 4, to then have the choice of whoever is there, the second best quarterback, the third best quarterback, whatever you deem is possible, could get the second best quarterback in this draft class, whoever they deem that is, without even having to trade it and trade up, So obviously, this could all just be a bunch of crap, and there definitely might be some teams that potentially want to trade up and move into those spots. The Texans could, if the Texans are not going to get a quarterback, then they maybe trade that number 2 pick. They pick up an extra first rounder, and then they'd have 3 first rounders, and you get all this talent acclimated with whatever quarterback you're going to get most likely next year. And then there's Arizona. And we know Arizona has gotten a phone call from at least half a dozen football teams that are looking to try to trade up. And if what we heard about the Texans is true, that if Carolina takes Bryce Young at number 1 and all these other and the Texans don't want a quarterback, then there is going to be 7 or 8 different phone calls to Arizona within a 10-minute period that are asking them who is going to give me the biggest package to move up and either get Stroud or Richardson. What do you make of this, Cody, hearing that Texans may not take a quarterback and Arizona's clearly not? If Carolina's the only team that takes a quarterback at number 1, how does that fare for the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, obviously it does depend on, do they trade out? I could see a scenario where one or both of those teams trades out and gets a king's ransom or gets a good amount. And then, they're like, you know what, we'll wait to get a quarterback, or we don't need a quarterback in Arizona's case. And they're like, you know what? Yeah, we might miss out on Will Anderson or whoever, but it might be worth it to us. It might be worth it for us to do that and get, maybe we don't get the quality. We don't get the guy who's, as ready-made as Will Anderson, but we get a ton of picks within that, first, second round. And they feel really good about that. Kind of what maybe the Colts did a couple of years ago with the Jets, who were very quarterback needy, and the Colts didn't need a quarterback at that point. They were able to get a couple second-round picks out of it, in future years. And so maybe that's something that, that does happen, because we do know there are teams who are desperate to get a quarterback, right? There's teams. But the question, I think, for these two teams is like, are they willing to move back, maybe potentially, fringe top 10 outside of the top 10? That's the question they're going to have to weigh. I really do think that, because there are going to be some teams that maybe people think are going to take a quarterback that might not take a quarterback. They might just push it off, or they might go try to get a guy in the, the middle to later rounds or something like that. Really, we just don't know, man. But I think obviously best case scenario is if both teams somehow stay put and they don't take quarterbacks, and the Colts have their pick of Stroud, Richardson, Levis, any of those guys.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I personally, I would have a hard time seeing that happen. That would be a dream scenario. But like, if that did happen, I mean, you're sitting great, man. You're sitting awesome. I mean, CJ Stroud falls into your lap at 4. That's a best case scenario, man, in my opinion. Or if you're sold on Richardson, as crazy as this is, Derek, and I don't know if the Colts would do this or not if Stroud is there, and we'd probably be mad at them if they did this, but what if they traded down and got some picks and took Richardson at 5 or something,
Maybe
they could.
Maybe
I'm not saying
Seattle move up and get one of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, Seattle wants to get, or like if Seattle wants to go and get Richardson, for example, and they trade with Indy, and Indy somehow falls back and gets Stroud. I don't know. That would be nuts if that did happen, and I really don't think it would happen. But like, all that to say, it leaves you in a lot better space than I think a lot of us maybe initially thought when Carolina traded up to 1. It really does. You have so many potential options that you can take here if that scenario did take place. I mean, you can move any direction you want. I mean, I think a lot of us would be overjoyed if CJ Stroud was the pick. I think people would be super excited if you got maybe a couple more picks and you still got Anthony Richardson. Like, there's a lot of routes you can go here if that does happen. Again, it may not happen, but it definitely is presents you a lot better opportunity than maybe we initially thought.
And I just think for anyone that's questioning whether or not Bryce Young goes number 1, listen, Bryce Young may not exactly be 100% what Frank Reich may want in a quarterback, but the GM, Dave Tepper, definitely loves Bryce Young for a multitude of different reasons. As I already stated, he's watched him at Alabama for the longest time. And when those test scores came out of his football intellect, by far and away the best of any quarterback in this draft class by a long shot. Richardson had a good score. Levis had a good score. Stroud had a bad score. And Bryce Young had a really good score, like an elite score, like a score that's up there with the Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrows of the world. So clearly the bright mind of a Bryce Young in that regard for somebody like Tepper, who takes a lot more of that into consideration, definitely seems like a guy that would want someone who's going to be smart enough to handle what Frank Reich is going to be putting on the football field. It's just a matter of whether or not Frank Reich's going to be on board with taking a quarterback like Bryce Young. So it's going to be a lot to handle, and obviously we're not going to know definitively until draft night. But this clearly shows that Bryce Young is not making it out of the top 2. No question about it. Bryce Young is going to be a top 2 pick in this draft. Just a matter of whether or not he's number 1 or number 2. We're going to find that out, but that's going to do it for this one, guys. We're going to have more draft content coming up. And again, if you made it to this far in the video, please be sure to subscribe, and also be sure to check us out live for the draft nights. We're going to be live streaming all of it. So make sure you guys join us and enjoy the craziness of draft night with us as the Colts hopefully get their franchise quarterback. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.